In this video, we're going to build an API and we're going to merge two bits of data together. Let me show you. In our app that's running at the moment in VS Code, we're going to get data that we have within the apps. That could be from a database or from a cache or from anywhere else. And we're going to merge it with GitHub data. Let me run it and show you. So if I send a request, I'm using Nick from our community as an example. As you can see, it brings in Twitter followers, GitHub followers, and public repos and some of the information from GitHub's API. If I send the request for mine, I get YouTube followers, Twitter followers, and the GitHub information as well. So we've got two bits of data coming together in our API. And I'm using this through VS Code to query our API. You could use Postman, you could use the browser for GET requests. And if you don't know what REST is, I will show you and I'll explain it, and we will build this app together and I'll show you how quick it is, and we'll use NestJS to help us do that. Before we get into the tutorial, let me tell you a bit about myself and my channel. I'm a self-taught full stack developer with over 15 years experience. I'm a GitHub star and I'm a GitHub star of the year. That's like 1 out of 55 million people. My goal is to help you accelerate your skills and grow your network so you can get the job and clients and money that you deserve. If that sounds interesting to you, give this video a thumbs up, subscribe below, and hit the bell button so you get notified every time I go live or post a video. Bonus tip, I do have a second YouTube channel that I started recently, and it focuses on 1 minute or less video tips. The link is in the description below. So what is a RESTful API? It stands for Representational State Transfer. Just like when you search Google or do a search on YouTube, you use the user interface. An API is the same, but from an app's point of view. Let's talk about some of the terms that you've probably heard of quite a lot of the time. Endpoint. Endpoint is the URL that points to the resource. And to get access to this, you need to make a request with a certain method type. You're probably familiar with GET because you use that in the browser all the time. There are other methods, and I'm going to tell you what they are now, but I'm not going to tell you all of them because the others are not used so much, and you can go look those up. But the ones that are popular and used a lot is GET that I mentioned before, but if you use GET without an ID, you get a list of resources. So for example, if you're querying GitHub to get the repo and you don't provide an ID or a UID, you will get a list of repos. But if you use the same URL and URI and add a repo ID, you will get a single repo back, and usually with more data. Post is used to create a new resource, so you don't have to have an ID on this. A new one will be generated and passed back in the response. Put is used to update a resource, the whole resource. So you need an ID in the URL for this. This is not optional. And any fields you omit, they will be deleted from the resource. If you wanted to update part of a resource, you would use patch. And you still need an ID, just like with put, but it will only update the fields that you supply, and any that you omit will just be left alone however they are in the database already. We mustn't forget delete. Delete needs an ID and it will delete the resource for you. If you wanted to filter a list, for example, this wouldn't go in the URI, this would go in the query parameters, so you could filter the data or use a sort, etc. JSON is the key data format that is used for this communication. And the great thing about it is it can be used by any language. REST is language agnostic. Any language that can make a HTTP request, Node, Python, Go, any of those languages and more will all work just fine. Let's get into this. Let's just create our app. I want to show you right from the beginning. So let me get rid of this code behind me and let's create a project from scratch. From the command line, then we'll open it up in VS Code and we'll work together and we'll add functionality as we go along. Here I've got my terminal behind me and I've already installed Nest globally, so we can use the Nest CLI to create a project. And there are other frameworks and libraries that you can use, but what I really like about Nest is it comes fully loaded with everything you need, from WebSockets to database connections, and so you can get up and running in minutes and focus on your app rather than trying to do all the scaffolding of building a framework yourself. So to install Nest, it would be npm install globally nestjs CLI. I've got that installed already, so what I want to do next is run the nest command, which is nest new and the project name. We'll call it API demo. And they will ask us a question, should we use npm or yarn? I'll go with vanilla npm, we'll give that a moment. Now that's been created, let's navigate into the project. We called it API demo, and the first thing I'm going to do is open it in VS Code. So now it's open in VS Code. Let's start the app and just check everything works okay before we make any customization. So to do this, you would run npm run start dev. Get the app up and running, and let's check. So what we can do here, we can use the browser, we can use Postman, we can use VS Code. I like to use VS Code because I can then save my HTTP requests for other people to use. So I'm going to create a new file. I'm going to call it requests.http, and then in here, I'm going to make a request to localhost 3000, and that's it. And because I've got the request plugin installed, it comes up with this button up here. I click it, and you can see we've got hello world. So this works. So where does this come from? Let's take a look. So if we open the source directory, we have an app module, which is where all components will be brought into and be declared. And then we have a controller. So here in the controller, it's saying it's the app controller, it's injecting a service, which we'll have a look in a second. And this is all generated by the nest CLI command, which is really awesome because it gets you going really fast. It just says get with no path. So it's going to be the root of the project. And then it's going to call the app service get hello. And if we go to that, you can see it's returning a string. And just to check that it's working, we're going to say, instead of hello world, we're going to say hello Eddie Hubbers. And if I save that, it will automatically rebuild. And if I go back to the request HTTP, and if I run the request again, it says, hello, Eddie Hubbard. So you can see it's actually working. And yes, this is not in the JSON format just yet, it's in a string, but we will get to that. So next, what we probably should do is we should get a parameter coming through the URL for the resource, and that way we can grab some data. And because we're gonna want to grab data from GitHub, we're gonna need a username. So let's just get username as a string coming through as a parameter that we can grab. So username, and then we'll say get user, and we will pass it through as well. So here we will have param, and then we will call the params, nothing too exciting. And in the get user, we will pass through params. And it's coming out as red underlined because we haven't declared it in the service yet. So if I go to the service, and here we will rename this to get user, we will have the params come through. And then let's bring it back just to make sure it is working. So here we can hello hubbers, I am, and we will say params.username. And let's run that again and have a look. Aha, we have an error because now it's expecting a parameter. So we need to pass a parameter at the end. So if I just put my GitHub username, it could be anything here because we haven't connected it to GitHub yet. And now if I run it, it says, hello Eddie Hubbers, I'm Eddie Jowd. Eddie Jowd is what I put in the URL. So if I just put test in here and ran it again, you can see it's dynamically now updating. That's how quick and easy it is. Stay tuned, it gets more exciting and you'll just see how powerful this is. Let's make this look more like a REST API. Let's return, rather than JSON, let's return an array. And we're using TypeScript here by default, but you can remove these if you don't want to be specific. I suggest you don't. I suggest you are specific about the types, but for now, for simplicity, we'll just remove these and treat it more like just JavaScript. Let's make this look more like a REST API. Let's return some JSON. So what we can do here is we could just return an object. Let's just return the params. I hit save now and make the request again. You can see now we're passing in the username test and it's coming back as an object test. So if I just put Eddie in here again and send it, you will see that it changes. So that's pretty awesome. Let's create a pretend database for now, and then we can get data from GitHub and we can merge the data together. So let's create some fake data for now. We could create an object up here. So I'm going to create a class variable. I'm going to say it's private, and we'll just call it data. Let's put a couple of people in here. So we'll put me first, and we can say Twitter followers. I think I got about 7,000. And then we can say YouTube followers. I think I got about 19,000. And that's it, because the rest of the data, we will get real data from GitHub. And let's put another person in. I want to duplicate that line, and we will put in Nick's GitHub username. Hopefully I spelled that right. And I don't know what Nick's numbers are. I'm just gonna put 1,000 just to make it different to mine. And Nick hasn't got YouTube, so I want to delete that. So there we've got data. So what we could do here is let's return some of this data when we select the user. So instead of params, let's say we explode data. It's a class variable, so you need to put this, and we'll explode it on the username. So let's save this, go back to the request, and let's put Eddie Jowd, my GitHub username. You can see it's coming back with Twitter followers and YouTube. And if I duplicate this and put nicks in. We need to separate these so it knows there's multiple requests. And now if I send the request for Nick, well, it comes back empty. Aha, I've made a typo. It doesn't match. This is great. If the user's not found, it comes back with no data, which really should be a 404. So that's something we can add later on. I'll show you how easy that is to do that. That looks better. So if I send the data now, you can see it comes back with Nick's data. If I send a request for mine, it comes back with my data. Perfect. So that works. Now let's make an external HTTP request to a third-party API, GitHub, and merge the data with this one. For this, we need to add the HTTP module from NestJS, which is really, really simple. If you open app module and we need it as an import, we will add HTTP module, hit enter, it'll automatically complete. You can see the import is coming from NestJS common. We'll save that. The next thing we need to do is we need to now grab the HTTP service so we can use it in this class. And the way we do this is in the constructor, we will make a private parameter, and the dependency injection will automatically give us the service that we've declared in the module. So we will call it HTTP service, and we can call this anything we want. It's what we'll use in this class, but the type's the important part. That's how it will map it to what we want. We want the service, and then in here, we want to return the data from the service. So let's make a request. We would say this because it's a class variable. The private variables in the constructor become class variables. It's really, really awesome. HTTP service. Let's make a get, and we will make it to GitHub's API. And we want to go to the resource users, but we don't want a user list. We want a singular resource. So we will pass in a username, which will be coming through when we make the request to our API. And then the response will be a response object with a data object inside. And we actually want to make it easier for the controller to just have the data ready. So we should do more of the heavy lifting in the service. Therefore, the controller is more the glue to glue different parts of the project together. So what we'll do is we'll do a pipe here. And those of you familiar with RxJS or Angular will be familiar with this. And this just allows you to do some manipulation. There's some amazing operators that you can do. And we'll just use a map. And in the map, we will want to grab the response that we got from the get. And then using the ES6 style, we will say, well, with the response, just grab out the data. Nice and simple. Map needs to be imported. And that comes from the RxJS operators. You could convert it to a promise and work with promises, but you're making your life harder for yourself. So now we've got the map. We actually want to do another map. So the map we want to do, this will be data now, because in the chain you can see from the previous step, we've got just data. And this is the object that we'll want to return. So we had this from before. We want to keep this. And what we want to do is still return the data that we had before, but now we also want to return GitHub data. But let's map it to what we want. So we actually wanted the GitHub followers. And that will come from data.followers. And if you use TypeScript properly, you would have an interface or a structure for this. So we would exactly know what is available on data. But to keep things simple, I'm not going to go into that. If you would like a video or a live stream going into more details on the benefits of using TypeScripts and types and so forth, let me know. I'd love to do that because it will make your life so much easier. Put a comma, keep ESLint happy. What else do we want? Let's bring out how many public repos. Will be data public underscore repos. Bring out the person's name would be useful. Data.name. Let's find out where they are in the world. Location, data.location. And let's bring out their bio. That can be the last thing. But you can add as many things as you want on this. The next thing we will need to do is change the return type. So again, for simplicity, I'm just going to remove this, but it is better to have the types. Now the project has been rerun. Let's run it for mine. And you can see I have the data we have from our app, it could be from a database. In this case, it's hard coded. And then we actually have real data from GitHub. I didn't code Eddie-Jowl, I didn't code my location. That came from GitHub. And to prove it to you, I'm gonna do Nick's one, and you can see this is what we had hard coded, which could also come from a database. And then this is actually comes from GitHub, which is super awesome. So now you can see how easy it is to create an API and merge data from different data source. You might have heard of API mashups and so forth, where you can, I don't know, get weather data from here, Twitter data from here, YouTube data from there, GitHub data from there, and just mash it up and build some awesome API, awesome web UI, awesome mobile app. And you may think, well, why create an API? Well, an API, then this data can underpin your mobile app, your web app, and so many other, even IoT devices. And I'll run it in the browser just to prove to you that I'm not cheating. So if I run it in the browser. I've made it really big so you can see, and I'm using my username. It comes up with the same data that you saw in VS Code. And if I use Nix, it also brings up Nix data in the browser. And we can do this in the browser because it's a get, but if it's a put, post, patch, delete, it needs to be done with something like Postman, or done in the code, or done in a plugin with VS Code. Just to conclude, it's really easy to get API up within a few minutes, and then you can start adding value to your project immediately. Don't try and build a framework and build all these sorts of building blocks. Use existing building blocks so you can add value to your project and to the community and your users straight away. Let me know what else you would like to see. We could do things like automated testing on this. We could do this deploying this to a Kubernetes cluster. There is so many more things we could do. Let me know in the comments below what you would like to see, and we can continue working on this project. And also don't forget, give this video a thumbs up and subscribe below. It really helps support the channel. Thank you.